Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Science of Superpowers. I'm really excited to have you back again today. We have David Charlson with us. David, you want to say hello to everyone?
Hello, everyone.
Brilliant. He's going to share all of his brilliant wisdom with us here soon. We're going to be talking all about living in flow, right? That holy grail of the personal development, the self-actualization, that self-sovereignty, right? Living in flow, being able to, as I like to say, free flow through the field, right? And your little intention craft, and you got it all dialed in. You got your creative energy going, you got your creative power going, you know how to access your creative intelligence, and you're off and running, right? That is the goal here, folks. It is possible. Well, it's not everybody's goal, but it can be the goal. And if it's your goal, this is going to be a really great conversation for you. But how do you carry all of that, those amazing moments when we can tap into the field and that flow space? How do we actually live in them? So that's today's conversation with David here. So, but before we get started into that piece of it, we're going to ask David our pivotal question: what are your superpowers, and how do you use them for good?
I'll start with just a really brief story. When I go places, people come up to me and confess things to me, and it's been happening my whole life, like to the point where I'm like, "Why are you telling me this?" I've had people that are high up in military start telling me their frontline war stories, and so I was kind of confused. And then as I went after understanding what's my superpower, I realized that people would say you're a safe place, but then I had to actually own it and say, no, I'm actually safety. And safe places can feel dangerous to people, right? A safe place means I can tell truth, and telling truth often has been a scary thing for people to do. So people tell me the truth, they confess their trauma, and then right on the back end of it is their true identity. It's who they really are, what they really want to flow in. So I would say my superpower is I'm safety.
Beautifully said. I had to giggle a little bit. I remember I had a kind of a feisty moment when I was a counter intel agent, and I looked at my counterpart and I was like, dude, do I have on my forehead, tell me your secrets? It's like, please stop speaking. Because, in that world, especially if people just start disclosing stuff, like that was a longer report I was having to write. And I'm like, just answer the question. Please, I don't really want all this information. Oh my goodness. And so yeah, that I had a little moment there. You took me back. And it's beautiful, right? It's that receptivity, and in the energetic space, and as we understand our designs and how we interact, and the fact that we are really connected, there's always this beautiful interplay of receptivity. And when people are receptive to us, right, and are willing to reflect and to be and to sort of set themselves aside, essentially, and it becomes, that practice becomes really the being in the space with somebody else, like knowing yourself in the connection, is a really beautiful gift to others, and to yourself, because it allows for the dissolving of the separation, right, of that which kind of gets in the way of us sometimes, and it gives us the space to say, wow, I see me and you and me. And that gives us more puzzle pieces to kind of sort through, right? When we join together, we've got not just double the amount, but exponentially more, because of the creative principles that happen
Mm.
between us, where two or more of us gather in light and love. There are exponential forces available on, to work on our behalf. And so what you're speaking to is beautiful on so many different dimensional levels of simply like being a kind human, of allowing someone a space to say, wow, this is what's real for me, right? Creating a space where people are comfortable being themselves. That's unique, in today's world, as we kind of strive for our virtual avatars, right? To develop our virtual avatars as much as we want to, it's so that we can hide behind them. I know a lot of us are endeavoring to let that light shine through those virtual avatars, and that's when we connect on the phone, on Zoom, it's through social media, whatever it is. Any of us that have the ability and the willingness to allow that light to shine through those virtual avatars is right, it's brilliant. So the fact that you can embody that and create a space where people can really tap into that, is certainly beautiful. And then you use this in your work with others, right? Working,
Mm.
with execs that you coach. Talk a little bit about, how you got into doing that work.
Yeah, I started when I was in the mortgage business, and I had a radical spiritual encounter with Jesus in a dream, and then nothing made sense after that. It was just a big awakening, and
That's kind of the promise there, right?
yeah.
Inside
So,
out, instantly.
and then suddenly the way I did work in the mortgage business needed to transform. I didn't fit. And so what happened was I noticed more and more people. I started to see patterns because people would undress financially before me when they would come to get a mortgage. And I just started to see the patterns, and I realized the patterns weren't based on principles. They were based on the person's, a lot of them were heart issues. And so I started having longer sessions with people. As I would take their application, we'd start talking about their heart. So that developed into a coaching practice. That was my first coaching practice. That was like 22 years ago. And then those patterns, I just kept seeing more and more patterns. And I kept wanting to understand, okay, why do we do these things that we know principally don't make sense, but we're still kind of compulsively doing things that aren't helpful to us, whether they be financial or emotional or whatever. So that's how it got started. It evolved to a point where I just continually wanted to help myself and others, and I wanted to know the truth about what actually stops us from becoming fully who we are.
Mm.
And I didn't want to just become a confessional. I wanted to actually be I wanted that safe place to be a transformative space. So that's led me to my coaching practice today. It's taken me to some pretty crazy clients, meaning can I share one example as we have time for that?
Absolutely.
So I started coaching creatives down in LA, and I had this gentleman referred to me, and I have permission to share his name. He's passed away. His name was Busby, and someone said, "Yeah, he's a songwriter." And I thought, well, I don't know anything about songwriting. I'm not a songwriter. Well, it turns out he was a record producer, songwriter, and wrote for anybody you can think of in country music. Like, he was a very prolific. And he'd grown to the point in stature where his business acumen had kind of gotten in the way of his creativity, and he'd lost connection to that childlike space that I think.
Mm.
And so he'd burned through 5 coaches and basically said, "I'm going to be tough. You're not going to like coaching me." And I said, "Whatever." And we got him back to what the spark of his creativity was. And his quest was, he wanted to get back. He actually he knew his gift was solid, but he felt like he'd gotten old and lost, and his business acumen was overtaking his creativity, and he missed co-creating with people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I dared him to, when we boiled it down, it was, the way he described it was, when I'm with a musician and something beautiful and new comes out that is new for the world, that actually rises to the top of the charts, it's because I'm a really good friend to them. That's the way he described it. It's just like 2 really good friends hanging out, like high school kids or kids that play together. So I dared him to go there again, and he did. And he won. Like, he won the country music album of the year. But the part I'll never forget is I would get him crying, and he'd say, "I've done this before. I've cried before. But you don't understand, Dave. When I go out into the real music world, I'm going to get, it's fierce out there. That they demand things." And I just said, "I dare you to hold this space that you have right now." Because he was getting ready to go to lunch with 2 record producers. I said, "I dare you to hold this space that you're in, this flow space you're in. And just, you don't even have to talk about it. Just hold it during the lunch. Don't put on the business acumen mask. Just hold it." And he called me after lunch, and he said, "I had 2 record executives crying at lunch, and these people don't cry in front of me."
Beautiful.
So that I feel like kind of illustrates what I'm talking about. When you have that safe place and you're in flow, and you dare to believe like a child again, that it can withstand the pressure of whatever.
Brilliant. Story, David. And the concept of giving that vulnerable space, right? And then encouraging vulnerability. That's part of the write-up. Folks, if you're loving what David's talking about, get over to davidcharlsoncoaching.com. We'll have a link for you on the interview page. Because what he's talking about is that vulnerability, right? And we see that in today's world. And it is actually the key to living in flow, is the willingness to say, I'm not going to do it like everything else is. excuse me, especially when that everything else isn't getting you what you want. And that's really key. Is Dave, you said something really, really very, very profound, right? But it is, I believe, the element that holds people back. And it's the willingness to not do things the way you think you're expected to do them. Because what we find is that nobody's really expecting that. It's just nobody ever does anything different. And so it becomes this kind of normed conditioning. And if none of us stop to question it, even when the repeated behaviors repeatedly create situations that we don't want, the simple courage to stop and go, wait, hold on, what are we doing? And especially in this situation where that process, I call it kind of auditing your life, is like, wait, when did it work, and what was going on there, and what's not happening now? And what I find with a lot of clients is that something brilliant will happen, and then the mind, the human reasoning, wants to go back and figure out, how did this happen? But as we've discussed between us a lot, is that the variables, the details, the things that have to kind of piece together in order for these miraculous things to occur are far too numerous and nuanced for the human mind to get in the moment as is experiencing it. So we do the life review thing. We're like, oh, this is how this happened. Therefore, if I do this, and this again, this is how we think this
Mhm.
will happen. But we forget that we didn't do it in the first place. We didn't contemplate it in the first, we didn't plan it in the first place. It wasn't us in terms of the avatar that's taking those steps forward. It was something else. And when we kind of expand that something else out to include other people and how others work, and this real beautiful sort of surreal aspect of the field, this energetic co-creative space that we
Mhm.
all share, the ability to predict how things are going to co-create is impossible for the single individual, because it requires all of us, right? There are
Mhm.
too many details to kind of put together. But our minds think we understand what happened, and we think, well, that's how we do it. And then even though we put that emotion and it doesn't work and it doesn't work and it doesn't work, we still think that's how it should work. And now that creates a really beautiful space for self-judgment, right? For
Hmm.
doubts. And it's like, wait, why are we doing this insanity, right? And it's simply the program that we have, because we believe that it's up to us.
Mhm.
And despite all the evidence to the contrary, that these beautiful things happen in these co-creative spaces that we couldn't have predicted, we certainly didn't plan for, we think we did it. And
Mhm.
so, as you're working with clients and helping them see this, what tips do you have for them for kind of that childlike space? Like, let's say
Yeah.
people are like, yeah, 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 whatever. How do they get back there?
Um, so I do something called the essence exercise, and it's it's really simple. It's a 360 exercise where they get feedback from their friends and family, whoever they choose, and it's a list of positive human character traits. So you have, and so they end up with this mosaic of positive human character traits. And then I ask some qualifying questions and help them dance with these words that describe them that came from others. Um, and then we go to what I call the third space, and this is really like the core of my work. So I'm on the call with them, and I know my space as well as I know it. I'm still learning about my space. I'm still learning my superpower. I feel like it's infinite. It goes on forever. So I don't want to box myself. I notice them. I'm listening to these words, and then I basically say, there's nothing for us to do right now except tap in,
Mm,
and then something's going to emerge. We take these usually 30 or 35 words and narrow them down to 8 words. And some of the words they're comfortable with, some of the words they're not, but they've gone through a process. And then usually a phrase or a pattern or an image, something gets pulled from the divine into this moment, and I call it an anchor. And it's really just a portal that is for now, that allows them, and we'll know it's right because it's super meaningful, and it changes the person's frequency, and all of a sudden
mhm,
they're like, oh my gosh.
mm,
And then I have them write a who statement, like, well, based on that, who are you and what kind of space do you create? So we start there. And then, so once that space is established and they have kind of a new, fresh perspective on themselves, it's then to your point, the co-creation space is, hey, when you go out into the world after we get off the phone, spend some time anchoring into that reality that you just rediscovered, that just got refreshed. Like, find an anchor, find a video, find a music, find things that bring that alive in you. And then when you're with people, pay attention to what's happening in their space. So it's kind of like a Venn diagram where there's me, there's you, and there's this space all around us that's big, really big. And then there's this third space, and there's this overlap that's just waiting to be discovered. It's like sitting there with mass potentiality.
Beautiful.
And you can do that with friends, with family, with your spouse. I call it the third space, and all it takes is one person to point attention to it, and then if the group, it's powerful. So
brilliant. Yeah,
I call it the third space exercise.
it's fab. It actually matches up with the exercise that we teach people on how you harmonize differences, right, within yourself, within relationships. It's the trinitization process where we have these contradictions inside of us, but most of us aren't capable of holding contradictions because it competes with a conditioning that we have. And so once we've matured enough or developed enough to be able to acknowledge contradictions inside of us and say, I am this and I am this. My big aha with that was when I realized I held the contradiction of wholeheartedly believing in creation and wholeheartedly believing in evolution. And it was like, wait, hold up. Everybody's trying to tell me I can't hold both of those. I'm like, but I absolutely do in some capacity, not even realizing that created some cognitive dissonance inside of me until I came to enough a level of awareness till I could see myself kind of going back and forth. And then we started playing with that in our relationship and our marriage. And I watched Justin and I have almost the exact same conversation, but arguing it from exact opposite viewpoints. So I'd hear my words coming out of his mouth that I was just arguing the day before, whenever it was. And I'm like, okay, we can't obviously feel very strongly about the positions we're holding if we're giving them up that quickly. What's happening here? And I started playing with these countermeasures and these push-pull mechanisms that occur between us. And when we understand those, we see they're actually inside of us, and we can manage them there. We manage them by saying, I'm both, right? I'm both. And then when you come out of that's that trinitization. I am the container that contains both, essentially. I am the being that contains both. It's tremendously freeing. And we don't even realize that we're stuck in this kind of push-pull countermeasure thing within ourselves because society says we need to know who we are, right? We need to be a specific way. We need to say, I am this. Like you said, I'm not going to box myself in. Like, I'm all of these things. I'm all the superpowers, all of them. I may not have discovered all of them. Maybe I haven't mastered all of them, but I believe that I have infinite potentiality, and I'm in the process of developing into it, right? So it's changing the dialogue from like, oh, I'm a Leo to like, oh, I can be all 12 zodiac signs. This just happens to be, predisposition. When we were doing our superpower design work, we could pretty well guide people in superpowers that they were predisposed to. But it's like, that's just your avatar. Like that's just like base level existence here. Like, what about the advanced courses and really superseding that? And that process of trinitization, folks, you can call it whatever you want to call it, but it is essentially taking almost two competing elements or just different elements and saying, I can be both. And then sitting in that realization, and that allows the field, it allows that flow space to move through you and say, okay, who am I as all of this? And it continually expands you out. And when you're able to do that, that is that experience of living in flow, right? Imagine your best prayer session, your best meditation, your best journey ever in connection and flow, but literally all the time. And it seems impossible. Yeah, Tonya, but what about real life? And what about this and that? And it's not that things don't get to you, but that becomes who you are. The other things become the blips, right? It kind of tilts the scale a little bit, normalizing the bigness and brilliance of ourselves. And accepting that this over here is just the conditioning. This starts to be like, almost feel like a fun house. Like it's like, these like, this makes no sense anymore, right? This version of reality that most of us were raised to believe as the only one. And those are the steps necessary to really live into this stuff, because it does require countering everything you thought to be true. So that can be alarming. How can people manage that in their own space when their lives and the people around it aren't really supporting that, right? They're not
Yeah,
changing with them. What can
yeah,
people do there?
yeah. So number one, I think you have to find creative ways and and a lot of these come spontaneously to anchor into that reality you're talking about, the bigger reality where you're not your conditioned self, right? Like you're not and what I find is interesting is that initially when you get awakened to it, there's this displacement process that happens where to some of the old has to kind of go, and it can come up through your conscious mind, and it can try to tell you these patterns are who I am, and they really kind of get intensified. So to answer your question though, how do you do it when you don't have the support? You number one, you need to learn healthy vulnerability. And healthy vulnerability is, let's say I'm sharing something with you and you're just trying to shut it down or forgive me. I'm making you really uncomfortable with the stuff I'm sharing. You're like, I only know you this way, David. Please
Right.
stop. You're freaking me out. I'm like, hey, all I need to do is listen right now. I don't need advice.
Mm,
I know I might be making you uncomfortable. I can actually train you to be a healthy, vulnerable space. You may not be able to step up. I might have to find someone else to do it with, but I often find when people have this, they're like, there's no one around that I talk to like you. They'll say there's nobody. I'm like, who do you have in your life that you're talking to like me? When they say nobody, I'm like, that's a problem. Like, so there are people all around you that have more capacity than you realize. And you have to
hmm
you have to be brave enough to go. You'll be shocked when you share this stuff where someone that you thought was, you perceive them a certain way, and they actually have empathy. They actually can
Perfect.
be. So you don't put it all in one person, spread it around. And
Share the
then
wealth.
understand that you're the steward of your own healthy vulnerability. So you're going to have to get a little bit of tough skin and just but you will very quickly find people that want to cheer you on, that want to support you. They're all
Brilliant.
around. But you have to have the courage to put it out there and then attract those people into your life.
Well, I love that. I love the concept of healthy vulnerability, and it is understanding our boundaries and what we really want, and not just accepting what comes, but rather acknowledging like it's determined a lot by how we're being, right? And if we're not giving people a chance with that vulnerability, but we're kind of testing and staying right above that vulnerable line, and then when we get their reaction, remember those countermeasures, when we get those back, it feels like rejection to our vulnerable selves. But if we're honest, that vulnerable self really never showed itself,
Right.
right? It was wanting to know, are you going to be safe for me to show myself? And a lot of times that triggers other people's things because now they know they're being handled or manipulated or tested or whatever, right? And these
Yeah.
are the nuances, folks, of these subtle arts. We're talking about vibrational levels. We're talking about stuff that for the most part we don't really discuss a lot in normal society, but we're starting to. So it's going to be awkward. It's going to feel weird, right? And a lot of it's just like, hey, this has been happening for me. What about you, right? And the more you're willing to share, you find out there's a lot of commonalities, almost inexplicable commonalities. Like, wait, at 9:05 you had this experience and I had this experience. Like, wait, hold up. Like, how did that happen? And we start to remember we're way more interconnected than we realize. So you're never alone in this. If you're looking for a process that you can walk yourself through, make sure you get over to superpowerexperts.com, because what we encourage in those moments when those little blips come up like that, and you can't run to David, when you can't run to your coach, when you need that sort of continuity factor, right? And maybe you don't have somebody right there, you haven't cultivated those relationships, knowing how to sit in that discomfort
Mhm.
for yourself and how to move that is very valuable. It doesn't replace the beauty and the brilliance of these co-creative spaces when two or more of us come together and love to share, but it is a great tool for when you don't have that available. And so
Mhm.
you can create that space for yourself with the creator, with creation, with God, with energy, whatever, however you view that, to be able to find that peace and that comfort for yourself is really powerful. And then maybe you feel a little bit more encouraged and strengthened to go out and develop those relationships, to ask for what you're really wanting, and to look for relationships that can provide that. David, brilliant, brilliant knowledge. Make sure you, again, that you're getting over to David's website and checking him out, David Charlson Coaching. I'll spell that out, DavidCharlsonCoaching.com. Get over there and check out his work. and see what he's up to. If you're looking for somebody to coach with, those are services that he's offered. Dave, what advice do you have for people as they're moving forward into their life and wanting to live in flow?
I think it's
Last
the
moments
one thing
here.
that's not talked about because enough is in my own life I call it groaning. There's a verse in the Bible I like where it says that the Holy Spirit groans in wordless intercession when we don't know what to say. And I think a lot of the trapped pain, a lot of the trauma, a lot of it, the only way really to get it out, and you were talking about just sitting in that place, is just to be real with it and release it, to find that there's a million ways to release pain, right? There's so many different modalities, but ultimately it's like making a commitment. I'm not my trauma. I was severely traumatized when I was little, and my journey has been to understand I am not that trauma. That trauma got in me, and some of it still masks itself as me, but it's ultimately it's part of my journey. And it's a beautiful part of my journey. But it's like, the more trauma I release, and the more. So some days I have a day where just an echo from the past comes, and it just feels like that's all I am. And it's like acute pain. When you have acute pain, it feels like it's going to be chronic pain, and most of the time it's not. Most of the time acute pain resolves itself. Sometimes it doesn't. But most of this pain feels chronic, but it's really acute. So it's like not freaking out, going, this is just an acute moment where something's being released, and then getting really good at, like you said, holding that space yourself, and then building with the healthy vulnerability. That's really the last piece of advice I give is understanding, and that trauma, that pain is not who you are. It is just part of the journey, and learning how to release it.
Beautiful, beautiful. Folks, take those words to heart for sure. And remember, you are so much bigger than we remember at times, so much more brilliant. And that's there too. No matter what you're going through, that is always there as well. David, thank you for being here, for
Thank you
sharing
for
your
having me.
superpowers, your wisdom, your vulnerability, and your guidance on just how to be, right? How to take steps into feeling more wholly who you are. Beautiful walk, and I appreciate your own vulnerability with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tonya. Thank you.
And to all of you out there, thank you so much for your continued support of the show and for the network. We appreciate you. Remember who you are. Get over to superpowerexperts.com, get signed up for those classes. That will help you remember in those moments when it's so hard. Have that little guiding light that you can shine on yourself to remember, and go out and develop those healthy relationships so you know you're supported in this. Folks, we love you, love each other. Goodbye for now.